Before we begin today's episode, we want to take a moment to thank every single one of you for being here. Whether you've been with us since the very beginning or you're just joining the Disturbed Intent community today, your support means everything to us. If you find value in the stories we tell, please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment, and hit the subscribe button. It helps this channel grow and allows us to continue bringing you in-depth, responsible, true crime coverage. Almost 3 years ago, when this channel was still in its early days, we featured several unsolved cases in a compilation episode. At Disturbed Intent, we make it a priority not just to tell these stories, but to follow them, revisit them, and provide updates when new developments emerge. One of those cases has since gone from a mysterious disappearance to a confirmed homicide, with an arrest and a conviction. Today, we're returning to that case, expanding on it in full detail, and honoring the life at the center of it all. This is the story of Bethany Ann Decker. Bethany Decker was 21 years old and living in Ashburn, Virginia. To those who knew her best, she was warmth personified. Her mother, Kim, often said Bethany had been smiling since the day she was born. She was upbeat, affectionate, and deeply loyal to the people she loved. As the eldest sibling, she naturally became the leader of the pack, someone her younger siblings looked up to for guidance, encouragement, and reassurance. Academically, Bethany thrived. She was accepted into George Mason University, where she pursued a degree focused on global and economic change. Friends described her as effortlessly intelligent. One roommate recalled how Bethany could procrastinate until the night before an assignment, write an essay in under an hour, and still earn top marks. But beyond her intelligence, it was her kindness and emotional openness that made people gravitate toward her. During her freshman year, Bethany met Emil Decker, a cadet in the Reserve Officers Training Corps who was preparing to join the Army National Guard. Emil was thoughtful and attentive in a way that stood out. Bethany's family quickly noticed how deeply he cared for her. If Bethany casually mentioned something she liked or wanted, Emil remembered it. He listened. He acted on it. Over time, he became part of the family, fitting in so seamlessly that it felt as though he had always been there. After dating for a couple of years, Emil proposed. Not long after their engagement, Bethany learned she was pregnant. Though the timing wasn't what either of them had planned, the pregnancy was welcomed with excitement and hope. They named their son Kai and envisioned a future together as a family. But reality soon began to set in. The stress of caring for a newborn, combined with limited finances and Bethany's continued studies, created strain. Emil began training with the Army National Guard, while Bethany took a part-time job at a restaurant to help make ends meet. The pressure intensified when Emil started preparing for deployment to Afghanistan. Knowing he would soon be overseas for extended periods was emotionally devastating for Bethany. She confided in friends that she felt the two of them were drifting apart, living in separate worlds. She worried they had rushed into marriage and parenthood without time to truly prepare. Some sources say the couple mutually agreed to take a separation while Emil was deployed, hoping space might give them clarity. As Emil left the country, Bethany moved into a new apartment closer to her job so she could work more shifts and support herself and Kai. It was during this time, at the restaurant where she worked, that Bethany met Ronald Roldan. Ronald was 31 years old and originally from Bolivia. What began as casual conversation quickly escalated into a romantic relationship. Bethany told friends she felt lonely and isolated, struggling emotionally with Emil's absence. Despite concerns raised by those closest to her, Ronald soon moved into her apartment. Almost immediately, the relationship showed signs of toxicity. Friends described Ronald as controlling, jealous, and volatile. Bethany's best friend, Sarah, said she was shocked by how quickly he moved in and warned Bethany against it. But Bethany, determined to make her own choices, pushed forward anyway. Bethany's mother, Kim, became increasingly alarmed as stories emerged from inside the apartment. Ronald constantly monitored Bethany's movements. He demanded proof of where she was and who she was with. He followed her to places she said she was going, waited outside homes until she came out, and bombarded her with calls and messages. Even more disturbing were concerns involving Kai. Kim noticed that Kai seemed afraid of Ronald. On one occasion, Kai had a black eye. The explanation given was that he had fallen backward off a chair while being watched by a friend. But Bethany's family struggled to believe that story. Their suspicions deepened when Ronald called Kai's daycare, pretending to be Emil. Fortunately, the daycare staff sensed something was wrong and took no action. After that incident, the daycare implemented a phone code to prevent Ronald from accessing information again. Bethany's situation was deteriorating rapidly. Eventually, she came clean to Emil, telling him about Ronald and admitting she had made a mistake. Emil, despite everything, still wanted to salvage their marriage. He told investigators later that he could sense something had been wrong for months. Bethany had been working nearly every day and barely communicating. When she did speak to him, she felt distant and overwhelmed. When Emil was granted leave in early 2011, the couple decided to take a trip to Hawaii, hoping time together might help them reconnect. But when Bethany met Emil at the airport, another bombshell emerged. She was pregnant again, and Ronald was the father. Despite the shock, Emil agreed to go on the trip. He later explained that after months in a war zone, being home and alive with his family mattered more than anything else. The vacation turned out to be meaningful. They laughed together, talked openly, and felt a sense of connection that had been missing for a long time. For a moment, it seemed like healing might be possible. When they returned on the 28th of January, Bethany visited her grandmother. They spent the afternoon talking, making pizza, and reflecting on life. Her grandmother sensed that Bethany was carrying far more than she was saying aloud. Bethany later admitted she felt overwhelmed by guilt, stress, and sadness, describing it as the lowest point of her life. That night, as Emil joined them for dinner, Bethany's phone suddenly began lighting up. She became visibly distressed, gathered her things, and rushed out, saying they didn't understand what would happen to her if she didn't go home. Emil was scheduled to leave again on the 2nd of February. The plan was for Bethany to meet him at the airport and see him off, as she always had before. She promised him she would be there, telling him she would always be there no matter what. She never showed up. On the morning of the 2nd of February, Emil Decker arrived at the airport, expecting to see Bethany waiting for him. No matter what struggles they had faced, she had never missed seeing him off before a deployment. When she didn't appear, a familiar sense of unease settled in. He called her phone. No answer. He called her workplace and was told she hadn't been in for several days. Before boarding his flight, Emil reached out to Bethany's family, telling them something felt wrong. As the days passed, concern deepened. Friends and relatives tried repeatedly to contact Bethany, but her phone remained silent. Her mother, Kim, received several strange phone calls, details of which have never been publicly disclosed. Around the same time, Bethany's close friend Sarah noticed something unsettling. She logged into Facebook and saw Bethany marked as active. Relieved at first, she sent a message. Almost immediately, she realized something wasn't right. The replies didn't sound like Bethany. The grammar was broken. Words were misspelled in ways Bethany never would have written. Simple questions went unanswered. Sarah knew Bethany's voice, her phrasing, her rhythm. Whoever was typing, it wasn't her. Sarah contacted Kim right away. Around the same time, Emil received an email from Bethany's account. He too felt certain she hadn't written it. Soon, Kim heard from 4 different people, all expressing the same fear. Bethany's accounts appeared to have been taken over by someone else. Bethany's grandparents lived closer to her apartment complex than Kim, so they drove over to check on her. What they found only deepened the mystery. Bethany's car was parked outside the building at an odd angle, with a flat tire. Neighbors said they hadn't seen it there before. It appeared suddenly, as if it had been placed there. When they knocked on her apartment door, there was no answer. Inside, everything was silent. On the 19th of February, Bethany Ann Decker was officially reported missing. At first, law enforcement acknowledged that Bethany sometimes went days without checking in, but weeks had now passed. She was pregnant. She hadn't spoken to her family. She hadn't seen her son. That wasn't Bethany. Authorities moved quickly, recognizing they had already lost valuable time. A review of her phone records and bank activity showed no use since the 29th of January. She hadn't attended classes. She hadn't gone to work. She hadn't checked into any hospitals. Her passport was still at home, eliminating the possibility that she had left the country. When police entered her apartment, they found no signs of forced entry or a struggle. Her belongings were still there. Nothing suggested she had packed up or left voluntarily. Her car yielded no clues either. By early March, investigators held a press conference. Search teams deployed K-9 units. Divers searched nearby waters. The FBI became involved. Tips poured in but led nowhere. Each potential lead collapsed under scrutiny. Given the timeline, police identified Emil as one of the last people to have seen Bethany. He was granted permission to return home and cooperate with the investigation. Emil voluntarily submitted to a polygraph test and hours of interrogation. He answered every question, some more than once. Despite the strain of suspicion, he remained cooperative, understanding the need for investigators to rule him out. Emil accounted for every movement between the 28th of January and the 2nd of February. Authorities confirmed his alibi. While acknowledging the strain in their marriage, investigators found no evidence linking him to Bethany's disappearance. Emil later said that despite everything, his only concern was finding Bethany alive. With Emil ruled out, detectives turned their attention to Ronald Roldan. Ronald was no longer living in Bethany's apartment. Police located him at his parents' home. He told investigators the relationship had ended and that he had moved out. Ronald also revealed something critical. He claimed he was the last person to see Bethany. According to Ronald, he saw Bethany on the afternoon of the 29th of January. He said she seemed normal. Her restaurant manager partially confirmed this, stating Bethany had called around 2 in the afternoon to get her schedule and confirm her shift that evening. She never showed up. Ronald claimed he hadn't reported Bethany missing because the relationship was over and they weren't in contact. However, investigators found inconsistencies. ATM records showed Ronald withdrew money later that afternoon. Text messages sent from his phone showed he attempted to contact Bethany after she had already stopped using her phone. Whether she ever received those messages remains unknown. Ronald's ex-girlfriend Danielle, with whom he shared 2 children, said she dropped the children off with him that afternoon. Ronald told her Bethany had left after a fight and that he wasn't sure she would return. Days later, he told Danielle he still hadn't heard from Bethany. Police executed a search warrant on Ronald's residence. They seized his phone, computer, and hard drives. Nothing immediately tied him to the disappearance. A background check revealed a history of police encounters, but no direct evidence connecting him to Bethany's fate. At this stage, Ronald was considered a person of interest, not a suspect. As Bethany's story reached national media, public fascination grew. A young mother, a deployed husband, a controlling boyfriend, a pregnancy. It was a story filled with unanswered questions. Criminal profilers noted that while voluntary disappearance was possible in theory, the circumstances didn't fit. Bethany had severed all contact, abandoned her child, and vanished without resources. That wasn't consistent with her character. March came and went. April arrived. Bethany's due date approached. Detectives contacted hospitals across the region. No records surfaced. Months turned into years. In 2012, a new detective was assigned to the case, bringing fresh eyes and renewed energy. That year, Bethany would have turned 23. Her birthday fell on Mother's Day. Family and friends gathered to honor her, sharing memories and spreading awareness. Emil attended with Kai. Kim connected with the Harrington family, who had lost their daughter Morgan. The families bonded over shared grief and unanswered questions. Later that year, Investigation Discovery aired an episode of Disappeared featuring Bethany's case. Public interest surged once again, but leads remained scarce. Eventually, attention drifted. Other cases took priority. Emil filed for divorce and was granted sole custody of Kai. For a time, the trail went cold. Then, in November of 2014, everything changed. Just before 2 in the morning, on the 12th of November, police in North Carolina responded to a frantic emergency call. A woman named Vicky said she had been shot by her boyfriend after a violent domestic attack. She told dispatchers he had broken her neck in 2 places, punched her, bitten her, and tried to kill her. Despite severe injuries, she managed to crawl to a neighbor's house. Her neighbor locked the doors, armed himself, and called for help. The attacker was Ronald Roldan. Ronald was arrested and charged with attempted murder. Though the charge was later reduced in a plea deal, the details of the assault shocked investigators. Vicky lost an eye. Her neck had been broken. The violence was extreme. While recovering, Vicky told authorities something chilling. Ronald had claimed he could make people disappear. A friend later called her after seeing a Nancy Grace segment about Bethany Decker. When Vicky confronted Ronald about it, she said his reaction terrified her. She believed he knew exactly what had happened to Bethany. Vicky went public. She appeared on television. She contacted Bethany's mother, Kim, directly. The two women formed a bond rooted in shared trauma and determination. Vicky wasn't the only one. Investigators learned Ronald had previously abused another girlfriend, April, who accused him of pushing her downstairs and destroying her belongings. Charges were dropped after a financial settlement. Detectives traveled to interview Ronald in prison. He refused to cooperate, shouting at investigators and denying any involvement. But the case had reopened. Something had shifted. And this time, law enforcement wasn't letting go. By the time investigators revisited Bethany Decker's case in earnest, nearly 4 years had passed since she vanished. To the public, the story felt frozen in time. To Bethany's family, it felt like time itself had become an enemy. Every unanswered day stretched the grief further, blurring hope with dread. After Ronald Roldan's violent attack on Vicky in North Carolina, law enforcement could no longer ignore the pattern emerging around him. What had once seemed circumstantial now carried disturbing weight. His history of control, intimidation, and violence mirrored everything Bethany had confided to her family before she disappeared. Detectives from Loudoun County traveled to North Carolina to speak with Ronald again. He was now incarcerated, awaiting sentencing for the attack on Vicky. The interview was hostile from the start. Ronald shouted, cursed, and refused to answer questions. He insisted he had nothing to do with Bethany's disappearance and demanded investigators leave him alone. But investigators weren't deterred. Behind the scenes, they began re-examining everything from the beginning: phone records, financial activity, surveillance timelines, and most importantly, Bethany's digital footprint. For years, Bethany's Facebook activity had haunted those closest to her. Messages sent after her disappearance had convinced friends and family that someone else was using her account. At the time, investigators lacked the legal authority to fully analyze the data behind those logins. That finally changed years later when a search warrant was issued for Bethany's social media records. What they found would quietly become the foundation of the case. Investigators discovered that both Bethany's Facebook account and Ronald Roldan's account had been accessed multiple times from the same internet protocol address in the days surrounding her disappearance. The logins overlapped in ways that could not be explained by coincidence. Bethany's account activity after the 29th of January did not match her usual behavior, language, or writing style. This wasn't hacking by a stranger. This was someone close. Detective Michael Boone, known for his role in solving the murders of Morgan Harrington and Hannah Graham, signed off on critical warrants related to Bethany's case. His involvement brought renewed confidence to the investigation. The Harrington family, who had grown close to Bethany's mother Kim, offered unwavering support, reminding her that even cold cases could still find justice. Still, investigators remained tight-lipped. Throughout 2019 and into 2020, little information was released publicly. The silence was intentional. Detectives were building something substantial, and they didn't want to jeopardize it. Then, in November of 2020, nearly a decade after Bethany vanished, the announcement came. Ronald Roldan was being charged. The Loudoun County Sheriff's Office confirmed that upon Ronald's release from prison in North Carolina, he would be taken into custody and transported back to Virginia. The charge was abduction. For Bethany's family, the news was overwhelming. After years of uncertainty, the case was finally moving forward. Within weeks, the charge was upgraded to second-degree murder. Prosecutors stated that while Bethany's body had never been recovered, the circumstantial evidence was strong. Digital forensic data, witness statements, and Ronald's documented pattern of violence formed a compelling narrative. Ronald pleaded not guilty, and his defense team requested bail. The judge denied the request, citing the severity of the charges and the risk he posed. The trial was initially scheduled for late summer of 2021. It was delayed, then rescheduled for early 2022, then postponed again after the release of tens of thousands of pages of evidence to the defense. Each delay was agonizing for Bethany's family. but prosecutors insisted the time was necessary to ensure justice was done properly. As the trial date was finally set for late January of 2023, emotions ran high. The date fell just one day after the 12th anniversary of Bethany's disappearance. For more than a decade, her family had lived in limbo, but the trial never began. Instead, Ronald Roldan changed his plea. In November of 2022, Ronald pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. The details of the plea agreement were sealed until sentencing, but one condition required Ronald to finally explain what happened to Bethany. According to his account, the two argued inside the apartment. He claimed he pushed her and she fell, striking her head on a windowsill. He said she died instantly. Panicked and afraid to call emergency services, he placed her body into a large bag and disposed of her remains in the apartment complex's trash compactor. Investigators were skeptical, given Ronald's extensive history of domestic violence, control, and escalation. Experts doubted his version of events. The idea of an accidental push did not align with the pattern of abuse described by Bethany, Vicky, April, and others. Additionally, Ronald continued to deny using Bethany's social media accounts, a claim already disproven by digital evidence. In February of 2023, Ronald was sentenced. He received a 40-year sentence, the maximum allowed, with all but 12.5 years suspended due to the plea agreement. Upon release, he would remain under supervision for 5 years and was ordered never to contact Bethany's family. For Kim, the sentence brought complicated emotions: relief, anger, grief. Ronald would serve only slightly more time than the family had spent searching for Bethany. Her remains had never been recovered. There would be no burial, no final goodbye. But there was truth, and for the first time in 12 years, there was accountability. When Ronald Roldan stood in court and admitted responsibility for Bethany Ann Decker's death, there was no celebration, no sense of victory. For Bethany's family, the plea brought a form of truth, but it did not bring her home. Her body had never been recovered. The life she was building was gone. The future she had written for herself would never happen. Bethany had once written a letter to her future self when she was 19 years old. In it, she laid out her hopes in simple, hopeful terms. She wanted to get married. She wanted children. She wanted a career. She wanted to travel and see the world. She signed it with a promise to read it again in 5 years. That letter resurfaced years after her disappearance, a painful reminder of everything that had been stolen from her. Through the sentencing hearings, Bethany's mother Kim sat beside Vicky, the woman who had survived Ronald's violence years later. Their bond had been forged through trauma, but also through courage. Vicky believed deeply that if she had not survived and spoken out, Bethany's case might never have reached justice. Kim believed that Bethany's story had helped prevent further harm by exposing the danger Ronald posed. When Ronald was sentenced, Kim spoke about the last conversation she ever had with her daughter. The night before Bethany was killed, she called her mother and said 3 simple words: "Mom, I love you." That was it. There was no warning, no goodbye, just love. The sentence meant Ronald would spend more than 12 years in prison, followed by strict supervision. For the family, it felt painfully insufficient. They had spent more than a decade waking up every morning wondering if Bethany would come home, wondering where she was, wondering if she was alive. Now they knew the truth, but the cost of that knowledge was unbearable. Bethany's son Kai would grow up without his mother. Emil raised him, knowing that one day he would have to explain what happened, knowing that answers, while important, could never replace her presence. Law enforcement acknowledged that the case had taken years because it relied almost entirely on circumstantial and digital evidence. Without a body, without a crime scene that screamed violence, investigators had to build the truth piece by piece. The digital footprint, the overlapping social media logins, the witness accounts, and Ronald's escalating pattern of abuse finally revealed what had happened behind closed doors. Bethany's remains have never been found. Investigators believe it is unlikely they ever will be. That reality is something her family must live with forever. In the years since Bethany's disappearance, Kim has dedicated herself to preventing similar tragedies. She works with Help Save the Next Girl, a national nonprofit organization founded by the parents of Morgan Harrington. Through education, advocacy, and awareness, the organization focuses on safety, violence prevention, and empowering people to recognize warning signs before it is too late. Kim often says that if Bethany's story can save even one life, then her voice still matters. Bethany Ann Decker was not defined by how she died. She was a daughter who loved deeply, a sister who led with confidence, a mother who adored her child, a young woman who believed in the future, even when life became overwhelming. Her story is a reminder of how quickly control can turn into danger, how isolation can silence victims, and how listening, truly listening, can make all the difference. Tonight, we encourage you to check in on the people you love. Say the words you might be putting off. Pay attention when someone says they are afraid. Tomorrow is never guaranteed. Thank you for watching Disturbed Intent. If this story moved you, please like the video, leave a comment, and hit the subscribe button to help us continue telling the stories that matter. Your support allows these voices to be heard and ensures that victims like Bethany are never forgotten. Bethany Ann Decker will always be remembered. Rest in peace.